I keep waiting for that award from Society of Illustrators for like technological, whatever advancement for the art form.
Hey, this is The Big Story. I'm Alex Morrissey. Thanks for joining me. Today's guest is someone I've had on my radar for quite a while. Aside from his great illustration work, he's a deep thinker about the business of art and design. I wouldn't be surprised if the byproduct of his work has touched more people and fans in the comic book industry than anyone else in the last decade. If someone's drawing comics or coloring them in Photoshop, I bet his brushes are in their hands. I'm talking about Kyle T. Webster. So, it's a new year, and it's time for change. And I have been buzzing away on my writing this year. I mean, all of 1 week, but it's been a crazy time. And my book came back from copy edits last week, so I am in full-on revision mode. And with writing, it's usually an uphill climb for me, and takes 3 times the amount of energy for me to get the one basic thing that most people can figure out. And my chief focus has been improving my writing voice on the page. Hopefully, with the grammar all settled, I can transform the work of the book to match a writing sample I produced last week for a writing seminar. And I'm super encouraged by that and daunted at the same time. I also have another big change that I wanted to share with you, and it's about the show. If you've followed along for a while, you'll know that this is a one-person operation now. And with my writing schedule, what it is, I just don't have time to do the video version of the show anymore. The edits and the uploading takes hours, and I just don't have that in my calendar. So if you found your way here wondering where the video version is, I apologize, but they are no longer. And unless somebody's going to start paying me to do this silly thing, they will remain unpublished. All right, well, let's get to it. This is me and Kyle Webster. You may win the all-time award for the nicest background.
Well, thank you. You should, So this room, the only thing I did to it was paint the blue and the white. If you can, but when you imagine this room, if you can,
mm-hmm.
as everything being wood paneling, just raw wood.
I see the beadboard. So.
That's what it was, and it looked very 1970s, So just by painting it and then throwing all my books up there, it just completely transformed it. So,
well, the term now that I'm using that I heard was the wall of credibility. And it's like,
that's funny.
I love that term, It's just like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, where I got to go this way. So I've got the giant Nemo, the Chris Ware, and I'm making sure everyone knows. Oh, look, he's got good stuff.
He's legit. He's legit. Isn't this weird evolution in the last 3 years where we all now have to be like part-time television producers?
Yes. Oh my God. You should, man. I can't turn my laptop because it's in this weird stand, but directly to my left, I have the light that's illuminating this room.
Right.
Is this like 2.5 foot by 2.5 foot, like professional photographer's light? Yeah. With this is the best. It's such a great format, and it's surprising to me that it's had this renaissance, I guess,
Yeah, it's like this weird combination of old school radio,
mm-hmm.
and then there's this other aspect of it, which is like conversational television shows. Like 2 people would sit in chairs and talk to each other.
That's pretty great, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it evolved or devolved into the modern talk show format, the late night show, where they'll have a guest for literally 5 minutes if you count in the commercial break, and all they have time to do is plug their latest project and then get off.
Right.
With the rare exceptions. But like, what was his name? I know this.
Not Dick Cavett.
Yeah, it was Dick Cavett, because he would, what I liked about Dick Cavett was just, he really would let the person talk. Although I guess everyone who was good at that did that. And he introduced me to so many people watching reruns or replays of his interviews that people I'd never heard of. I'm a huge fan of sleight of hand and close-up card magic and
Ricky Jay.
Oh my God. Yeah. R.I.P. Ricky Jay. I got a hold of his HBO, the recording of his live show that he did, Ricky Jay and his 52 assistants, easily 15 years ago. Somebody had posted it on a magic chat group. Couldn't get it anymore, and HBO wasn't playing it anymore. But anyway, the reason I bring it up was Dick Cavett had on several times on his show an entire 30-minute show with just this guy Slidini, who is this Italian.
Oh, I know I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, you should just watch the Dick Cavett Slidini clip. He had the most unique and original presentation of close-up magic with coins and scarves, and cigarettes. But it's just like amazing to watch. And the best thing about it is just the time that's given to him uninterrupted, and how different that is from now, where you watch and you can always tell everyone's racing the clock to get to the next commercial break or get to the next guest.
Right.
So yeah, podcasts have really kind of gone back towards just talking and not feeling pressure to like wrap it up.
You've been this unique presence in the at least from my perspective in the comic book community, like for these, I guess, like last 10 years or so. And, and I've used your products, and thank you. I bought your products before they were part of the Adobe world. Like I was like, well, I have a Wacom, and I'm going to draw things, so I might as well have better tools. So
double thank you then, because if it weren't for people buying them, I wouldn't be at Adobe.
Listen, drawing is the first love of my life, sitting and drawing.
Yeah, me too.
And I remember when I first got some extra sort of dough, I'm like, I'm going to buy that Cintiq. It increased my design work right away. It was just like, oh, I'm actually like physically manipulating layout here. Like this is a completely different world. So
you go from making a line and then undoing it, making a line, undoing it, making a line, undoing it, doing that 3 to 4 times for every single line, to actually just drawing the line and moving on.
Right. And and then when I sort of, after fighting with the existing brushes, in the Adobe Quiver, you sort of showed up on the digital horizon, and I was like, oh, what's all this about? And I don't know how I first came onto your stuff. And then I think I signed up for your newsletter. So I was getting all your sort of your, hey, here's what's going on. Here's this. And I was like, all right, this makes sense. Like, so I bought stuff. And then the next thing you know, it's like, cascade effect. I got everything, and then it's like, hey, they're free on Adobe years later. I'm like, God, oh no. I felt like I lost, like the value was gone, but whatever, it wasn't.
I think if you had bought everything I ever made, I think it was still under $100.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, yeah,
1,500 brushes.
Right. And the thing is, I would never even if it was like 10 brushes, like the time it would have taken me to figure out to make the 10 brushes, is that worth my time? Like, it's not. It just isn't. Like, I can't.
You may have. I wonder if you heard about it through Paulo Rivera, because he was instrumental in getting it really out there to the comics community. He was so helpful. And
great one. Yeah. No. Wow.
Yeah. If it weren't for Paulo, Tommy Lee Edwards, Rico Renzi, Matt, I always want to say his like persona, Color and Matt.
Yeah. Why am I blanking? Matt. And it's not a very complicated last name.
I know. Oh my, it's embarrassing.
It's not Hollingsworth because that's complicated.
I know. I want to say that too.
I know.
Well, yeah. Sorry. Anyway, Matt.
Yeah, Matt, we love you, Matt. It'll come to us, our old brains.
And yes, a few other folks were like just actually, Greg Smallwood. They would say that they would call out the brushes by name. Paolo even went so far as to mention them in a issue of the Valiant, like in the back pages where he was talking about his process, and like
Right.
it just made a huge difference because when people like that mention something, other people are like, oh cool, I'll check it out. So I just can't thank them enough. So I think it's I'm sure through somewhere through there and through social media you probably heard about them.
Wilson.
Yeah, thank you. Good grief.
Thank you, Google. And it was just one of those things where it made complete sense. And it's like, oh, the difference between that first brush you buy at the art store that you can afford, and you spend like $4.68 on a brush, and you say brushing it's hard, it's horrible. It's because you have a bad tool,
Right.
Then you eventually can afford a Winsor Newton. Okay, this actually is a repeatable thing. I can make a line and make another one. And it was the same kind of feel. Like you're like, oh, these actually have vibe and I can do stuff with them. So
Thank you. That's the best compliment I could ever get.
Well, it would be better if it came from Greg Smallwood than me, believe me.
No, man. No, when people who actually draw and like know what drawing feels like with different tools say to me that, oh, it was great because then I could be more comfortable drawing digitally. That's all I want to hear, because that's really what my goal was from day one.
Yeah,
for myself. That's why I was making them.
It's a crazy thing because, I speak with a lot of people who do this for their, daily bread. And it's like the tools are at a level now that they challenge the creator as to what choice that they make when it comes to producing the artwork. Like the digital tools are so fast that people are going like, maybe I don't need to do the secondary art sales market because I can get more pages done and I'll make more money on the front end, and the back end,
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting, that's not an effect I'm sure you even intended. That's not a second order effect that you were like, okay, well, here's what it is.
No, I mean, being an illustrator, well, first it came from just that, like you, running up against walls and getting frustrated with what it felt like to draw in this app that I love to this day. I mean, Photoshop's just such a beast, but the drawing experience, and Wacom made and still makes amazing hardware, but in the middle, the thing that was missing was the brush options, and it all just made sense for me to just make my own, so they would feel the way I wanted them to feel. And so to do that, I just spent a really unusually high number of hours messing around with the brush settings panel and creating tools on my own time, to where I started to really understand how to get the results I wanted. And for the longest time, I was just doing it for myself. And thank goodness for Corey Godby. I don't know if you know Corey Godby. Yeah. He's a fantasy artist. Well, he's also done comics. He did the interiors for some Dark Crystal stuff and some other bits and pieces. He's great. But he was selling his sketchbooks through Gumroad, just digital versions of them. He had physical versions at cons when I'd see him, and then like he mentioned to me, hey, why don't you try putting your brushes up there? So that was it. Just took off like a rocket.
And it's so interesting because I remember that sort of period of probably around somewhere between 2005 and 2010 when the idea of digital products for sale. Everyone's like, oh, you can make a thing and you can sell a thing and use the internet to sell it. And everyone's like, that's cool. And I'm kept thinking like, if you can create a digital thing, you don't have to make anything. You make it once and it's just
practically zero overhead.
Right. And it's an unbelievable like platform and, model. If you can make a thing that is worth people showing up to buy,
Yeah. So much is luck and timing, man. I mean, like for me, it just I happened to be able to do it at a time right when Twitter was growing exponentially. This was 2013, 2014, around then. So people signed on to Twitter 3 years prior, but they hadn't really messed with it too much. But then it became a community thing. So comics artists and other illustrators were constantly talking on Twitter all day. So there was that. The second thing was there were actual creative, like there were these hubs where you would go to buy stuff. So you had Creative Market and Gumroad had just launched, and people knew to go to these places to find digital goods. And so like because of Twitter, because of Gumroad, and because of my ability to use social media to just get the word out and then connect with all these artists. And just for me too, I'd been in the business by that point, drawing for almost a decade. And I just made all these contacts with people all around. It was very easy for me to reach out to somebody and be like, hey, try these out. And if you like them, tell somebody or tweet about it or whatever.
Well, and you can see this, you can see the sort of the evolution on both ends of this is that like you had a need, you solved your problem, the way that and then someone says, hey, you can put this, out here. Why don't you put it up there? So you put it there. On this side, someone's like, hey, I really like what someone just posted, and they go, oh yeah, I did this digitally. How did you do it digitally? Because it sucks every time I try. And they go, oh no, I use this brush.
Yeah.
There. And they're heading this direction. You're heading this direction. And that middle spot is Gumroad for you. And it's really, I mean, that confluence is super rare. Like you can't make that happen.
No, I'm always quick to say that, I am really proud of what I made, and I did put a lot of time and energy into building a brand around it and all that kind of stuff, and that's great. But the time in which I made it, I made it public, was so perfect because of what you just said, and it just could not have been a better environment for digital brushes, for a digital brushes business to actually succeed. Like even 3 years prior, it probably would not have worked. And then if I had tried to do it today, because of all the competition that now exists, I wouldn't know where to begin. It'd be so hard to cut through the noise.
So like Adobe figured like, hey, we don't need to task a team of people who might not even be illustrators, to like sit there and come up with a bank of brushes. Mm-hmm. What we can do is we can take the existing, pinnacle of that product out there in the market and bring it in. Which is like that's lucky for you.
Oh yeah, and also that was I'm trying to think about the timing, and I've talked about this before, but I know after interviews I'm like, wait, was it that long, or was it shorter, or was it longer? But that whole process was about 3 to 4 years. I want to say 3 years if I'm going to get it just right. Of me first suggesting to them that we do some kind of collaboration, and then that grew into me suggesting we do an acquisition, and like the amount of years it took for me to actually work my way through the company to get to somebody who could make that kind of decision and even see the value in it. That was crazy amount of work, and just relationship building and doing small projects with them and doing like live guest spots on Adobe Live, then creating finally after the first 2 years, I created a set of brushes for just 7 brushes that were going to actually be installed on download for what was then Adobe Photoshop Sketch, an iPad drawing app that they had.
Sure.
Which was a precursor to what is now Adobe Fresco, Fresco is far and away. It's got literally 400 or 500 more features than Sketch. But Sketch was the first sort of entry into drawing with Photoshop brushes on the iPad. And so then from that point, I met the right people in the company who I could then talk to about a much bigger idea. And that whole thing, once it was even like something we were talking about for real, because of me having to get a couple of lawyers involved and get a business manager and what was his deal? I can't remember what he was called. It was a guy who specialized in valuations for small businesses like mine.
Yeah, sure.
I had to pay him, so I paid him to do his work. Business manager got paid a lot, but without him, it never would have happened. So he deserved it. The lawyers,
they get
whatever.
their vig. They get their vig.
They get a lot of money, and I was very frustrated about that because of the amount of 6 hours of work amounted to at $400 an hour or whatever. It's just crazy how much lawyers make, but good for them. They passed the bar. So anyway, that whole thing took about a year. I mean, I'm probably exaggerating. It's more like 9 to 10 months, but that was crazy. So none of this was really something that I thought could happen. It's the kind of thing. I mean, imagine the ego on somebody. If I just started selling digital brushes, I was like, oh, now I'm going to make this this multinational corporation buy me out.
Sure. Right.
Like, that's insane. It did happen, but it happened as part of an acqui-hire. So it was an acquisition of the business, but I got hired. It was like not even something I thought would even be on the table. And so when they presented that offer, it was better than what I was even trying to do. So it all just it all worked out really, really well. And of course, I'm extremely fortunate. And it's amazing now that I get to sit here and help shape other drawing and painting experiences within the company, and continue to make brushes, which of course I really like doing.
Yeah. Well, it's, it's an interesting thing. It's really hard to plot out a creative career.
Oh God, it's impossible.
And I think along with the starvation element, that's one of the greatest fears any parent would have with a child, is because there isn't like I go here and I make the art and I go home. Like it doesn't.
Some in-house illustrators still existed in advertising agencies. When I got into advertising, I worked in web design and advertising before I became a graphic designer, and then finally started my own illustration business. But when I was coming into the ad world, there was still a few in-house illustrators working at the agency where I worked. They were gone. I was only there for 3 years, and they were gone at the end of my 3rd year.
And what years would those be? Just so
this was 1999 through 2001.
Oh, that totally tracks.
Yeah, a ton of my illustration work early days was just for ad agencies, and it was doing comps and really rough storyboards. Very rarely did I do an actual piece of finished work, because they would always pitch it, and then in the end, the client would go another way. It's like, how many times you actually do a finished piece of illustration for advertising? I know it happens for some people more regularly than others, but the few times it happened to me, it was a huge payday, and I was always like, oh, yay, there's going to be more of this coming. And then 2 years later, I might get another one if I'm lucky.
I think the percentage of actual illustrated like print advertising is super low.
Oh yeah,
it's just, and it's unfortunate, because I think it is as valid of an answer as anything else. It's just, of course, right. You just have to have the right solution for it. It's not like, well, we'll just do a drawing instead of a picture. Like, that's not the answer. Like, because everyone's going to say, well, let's just do a picture, because then we don't have to, like, we can control everything.
No, clients they're so wary of it. They're so scared because they don't know exactly what they're going to get but they have this like sort of security blanket with photography or whatever, where they're like, I know what the image is, I know what you showed me, and this is going to be the result. And then with illustration, it's like, what's it going to look like? And that trust isn't there.
The client can be on set.
Yes.
And they can say, hey, can you move the soft box?
Yes.
There you go. I remember the word.
You remembered it.
But that's the thing is that they have a bit more of agency in that situation as opposed to what you said, which is like, they don't know.
Right, exactly. But then of course a lot of the campaigns we remember are the illustrated campaigns, and the illustration community knows of the big ones because they are so few and far between, but like they really do stand out. I remember all the way back in the late 80s, early 90s, Mark Fredrickson did these Levi's billboards, and they were in magazines, and they were posters, and they were in store displays of just like these cool looking kids with their Levi's 501s or whatever it was. And those stuck out. Like, they were so amazing and so cool. It was like back when acrylics and airbrush, like amazing work.
Well, I worked on a Levi's campaign around that time too.
Oh, wow.
So when they launched Type 1 in 2001, 2002. So I did all that stuff. And it's funny, like I did all my ad sort of comp work and storyboard work. I did it all digitally, except for a couple things. I would do my initial drawings, with pen or pencil, scan those, and then I would just do everything else, on a Intuos.
One of the other reasons I wanted to make the brushes was so people could do that kind of work and make it look traditional. And
that was, what was missing? It drove me nuts was there was no magic marker.
Man, the marker set I released is okay, but the thing is you can't do mixing the same way. And the only place you can mix markers that look like markers is, believe it or not, Adobe Fresco, because the engineers created a separate mixing algorithm.
Really?
Just for it's just two brushes. That's the only problem. But if you open Fresco, there's this category that says markers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a brush marker and a chisel marker. And if you try blending color with them, it works completely differently from all of the other. Yes, it's just for those.
Okay.
Nobody knows this. Nobody uses them. But then when I show people who are like fans of Copics and whatever, then they're like, oh, crap, I didn't know that was in there. And nobody knows. But just so you know, and so other people, if anyone's listening to this, you can get like marker blending to happen.
All right, so if you can get Bruce Timm, Ronnie Del Carmen, Ren Murakami, any one of those guys to do some pieces in Fresco using because
I should get Ronnie. I'll reach out to him.
They are so good with markers, like
I know.
At a ridiculous level. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up overseas. I grew up all over the world. It's awesome. So spoiled. My parents, before we were born, went to teach in Pakistan, in Islamabad, Pakistan, for 2 years, and they were working in New York State. Moved to Pakistan just because they saw an ad in a some kind of educational publication about teaching overseas and go to exciting places, and so they went to Islamabad of all places. They had such great time. So when I have a twin brother. When we were born, we lived in the States just until we were 5. And my mom ran a nursery school during that time. And then once we were 5, they're like, okay, cool. They're old enough. Let's get out of here again. Went back to Pakistan. We lived in Karachi for 2 years, for first and second grade. Then moved to Singapore for 4 years. Then foolishly moved to New Jersey for 2 years. My parents had this notion that, maybe they're losing sort of their connection to, the country that their citizenship reflects or whatever.
Right.
Miserable time there. We didn't fit in with anybody. We just had these 6 years of schooling in this completely international environment. We knew nothing about or didn't care about American football or baseball or all that crap. So the boys there just bullied us relentlessly, and I hated it. But fortunately, after those 2 years, we kicked it back overseas. We lived in Cyprus for a year, in the little island there, in the Mediterranean. That was great, and then finished high school in Taiwan. So bounced all over the place, made friends from all over the world, and still friends with many of them. And the best part about all of that was just being exposed to so many different ways to do pretty much anything. Before 18 years old, and so I think that has influenced how I think about everything with my art. It's trying different styles, trying different approaches, making different tools, and trying different small business ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Being an illustrator these days is not just sitting around and drawing. You got to be trying all kinds of stuff.
Think about it. With all the tools available, how amazing of a period it is to be a creator of whatever the thing you're doing. In the 90s, there was nothing. Like, you basically were working on sample pages and pounding on doors to get work.
It was so much. I mean, get your stuff in workbook, get your stuff in communication arts, in graphics, maybe, hope that somehow leads to some calls, hope that people are looking at those books, and then physically go office to office, make the trip to New York and go into the offices for editorial and go to the agencies and try and meet with the creative directors and leave them like an actual physical book of samples. And I mean, it was no wonder there were only so many people whose names you really knew. Like the amount of people right now making a quote unquote living as illustrators is insane. It's so high, but like in the 90s, you knew pretty much who was out there and who was surviving because they were in the books. They were in, like, people's mentioned their names, and
they
it was
were on
just a hard time.
And you saw their work on the products. You're like, oh,
Yes.
that's Greg Manchase. He does these covers. That's because he's the guy.
Yeah. And in comics, of course, I mean, oh my gosh, like literally writing letters.
Yeah.
And sending sample pages, and crazy to do it that way, but that's how it was. And there was no Instagram.
No. So you're living around the world, and it seems to me like having this in your hand is a great thing. You don't need a whole lot. You got paper. I got this. I have this imagination. I can kind of make stuff. That makes sense to me. Have pencil will travel. Was art like the fostered kind of thing in the home, or was it something you did and they just said like, well, cool?
So my mom brought home some Star Wars coloring books, 1979, 1980. And I would, I was like, whatever, 4 or 5 years old. I would color the books and then draw from the books. Like once I was done coloring them, I would open them up and just copy all the drawings onto paper. And so I loved drawing. I just remember distinctly drawing Star Wars, drawing the Hulk, drawing Superman, Batman, those are like comic stuff and Star Wars stuff just all the time, day in, day out. Then for some reason just really loved drawing horses, which is, I still to this day cannot draw horses well, but I just wanted to draw horses well because I just thought horses looked great. And I also had a little book. She got me so there was these series of books, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and anybody out there listening who's a comics person probably remembers if they're roughly our age. Walter T. Foster, these series of instructional books you could get, the Walter T. Foster books, the Lee J. Ames books. Get them in the library. Some you could buy them very cheaply. I had several of those books. She even, I remember this is so funny. I remember her for Christmas when I was in second grade, got me a book of how to draw the nude figure. Okay. Which a lot of parents would be like, well, that's the interesting choice. But it was one of the Walter T. Foster books, and I just copied all these naked women out of that book. Mm-hmm. And at that age, it's not like I had any interest in them, other apart from just these look interesting. Yeah, sure. I'm drawn to them. I'm not sure exactly why, but I like to draw them. And that started me off on really already at that age thinking more about drawing accurate anatomy and stuff like that. And then of course, I'm wearing it right now. This, Tintin. Yeah. Okay. I was really lucky because the Tintin albums, a large number of them, not all of them, but a large number of them were available in our school library in Pakistan. And when I was in Karachi. And so I could just had those at home all the time and was drawing from them. So early interest in comics, and then everything. Third grade is when my dad gave us Mad Magazine. And that really blew it open because then I was looking at Mort Drucker. Sure. And Jack Davis. And I was just like going nuts, going, wow, I look at how Mort Drucker draws. And to this day, I'm still just blown away by him. But so then I was trying to figure out some of that stuff. And so I had all these different influences. But drawing was a daily thing. And I think like anybody you probably talked to and like yourself, I'm sure, it was just always the thing that you loved to do and probably got positive, responses, parents, teachers. Wow, good drawing. I like the way you draw. That's other or peers. That's
number one thing. Like I think every kid loves to do anything, but the second someone says, "Hey, that's nice," right. It just kicks it in, and then you as you get better and build confidence, of course you enjoy it more, like anything else. And then you also then get to that point, like most kids, where around between the ages of maybe 11 and 13, you hit that frustration point where what you're imagining doesn't look like what you're drawing, and then you really, really want it to. And a lot of people give up at that point. But I think if you've been drawing that much by that age, that's where you push through it. Most people actually do. All kids draw, and all kids love drawing, and then they stop around that age because they actually start to become critical of their work and they get frustrated and they stop. So, those of us who've been doing it a lot more at that age usually push through and try and figure out why it doesn't look the way they want. And so they start getting the right information. I can cite a few influential people in that sort of teenage years. Did you have anybody who kind of did that for you? Sort of buoyed you? Well, I was really lucky. I always had good art teachers. So 7th and 8th grade, this was when I was in New Jersey and a miserable kid having a horrible time, getting bullied all the time. But my art teacher
was from Taiwan, and his name was Mr. Chin. And Mr. Chin really, like, that was my special time, is when I had art class. I knew I was going to be happy because Mr. Chin would literally focus 90% of his effort during the class period on me.
Wow.
Because I took art seriously. I wanted to learn how to draw better. I wanted to understand everything he had to offer. And the other kids viewed art class as time to goof off and be stupid, especially the boys, which is just how it is. We all know this from art. Art is a hard thing to teach in middle school. So I got that really special, almost one-on-one time, even though it was a classroom environment, with him, 7th and 8th grade. He recommended books for me to look at from the library and stuff. I didn't know good art instruction books from, I knew what I liked, but, and then I think probably also around that time, because I had fewer friends and wasn't as happy, I did do more drawing. I wasn't as socially active as I had been up to that point. So that helped.
Yeah.
And also that was when I discovered how to draw comics the Marvel way, which was a Christmas present, 7th grade.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And don't ask me how my mom even knew what that book was, I think it was literally pure luck. She was like, oh, that looks like something Kyle would like. And that was a Christmas present. And of course, when you look at that book today, you still look at it and go, great book, man. This is it.
It really answered, 80 to 90% of all the questions you needed to know the answer to.
It's phenomenal. Just phenomenal. I mean, that whole concept of gesture, like I'd never seen that covered anywhere. Or like drawing. If you want to draw foreshortening, like just drawing a big shape in front, working your way back, using these simple shapes and simple primitives to construct a figure. This was so mind-blowing to me. It's an amazing resource. So that definitely had something to do with it. And then,
Let me just cut in for 1 second. I just realized when you were talking about it, something that book did that I didn't realize until this moment. It also told me that this is a job.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
This is here is Stan's language talking about, John Buscema and whoever else, he was speaking about in the book, but you're like, he's talking about the people in John Romita who are making the comic books. And I think I made the connection at that point. Oh, that this is a thing that people can do. I mean, I knew that there were names in the comic books, but that didn't really kind of connect until that moment I saw that book.
Wow. I don't think I made that connection. I maybe I did and maybe I didn't. It's so long ago. But that's really interesting. I think in the back of my mind, I always just assumed that was what I was going to do for a living someday.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And I never did. I mean, I thought, but it doesn't matter. I think what matters is this idea in the back of my mind that I was going to draw somehow for a living and draw stuff I like drawing.
Yeah.
It was never like I think, thankfully my parents too never even thought about talking me out of anything like that. I would talk about stuff like that all the time. And my mom also had brought home for another gift at some point, our gift, or it just was in the house. I don't know why. Giant collection of Norman Rockwell Saturday Evening Post covers.
Oh, wow.
So that's obviously a huge influence.
Yeah. You can drop that down in front of most anybody and they're just going to get lost in the work. And I don't think you have to be an artist. I think everybody just gets right into that work. It's so accessible.
Yeah. And there's always a whole story that you can glean from it that makes you smile or makes you think, or it's just clever, but it's like so much more about, that idea that an illustration can be beautiful, but it just gets kicked up another level when there's some element of there's some narrative or whatever. It's great to have to discover something in there, like, oh, I see what must have happened 5 seconds before the drawing.
Right.
Like that's so smart. I love it.
And I'm repeating myself. Apologies. Joe Orlando was one of my teachers in college.
Oh, wow.
Was his weekly assignment was find a picture and draw what happened 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after.
Oh, wow. What a great assignment. I wish I'd thought of that. I just retired from teaching this year.
So it was a phenomenal assignment for multiple reasons, but it because the photograph that's chosen by the art director from the photographer's keen eye is the one that tells the most story.
Mm-hmm.
And why is it telling the story? And so you can figure out what the story is around that, and that's what Rockwell does in his work, and all illustrators with great technique and aptitude. Well, listen, if you rise from the ashes for a weekend thing, you can do that.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll borrow it for an Adobe Live class, because one of the things I do is a free master class every Friday in illustration, and I'm always looking for great topics. And that one I think is just a great thing to just demonstrate. It's not.
I think Joe would love that.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah. So, how did you struggle through this sort of? Well, I mean, listen, we all struggled through middle school. How did you translate that to something where you had this internal fire saying, I know I'm going to draw for my livelihood? How did you kind of make that a reality for you?
Well, again, very fortunate to have good art teachers in high school. And the exception was ninth grade. There really was no art class for that year when I was in Cyprus. It was a tiny school. Half the students we had came rushing into the school because of the Iraq conflict, Kuwait, Iraq.
Okay. Yeah.
We had students from Syria, from Iraq, from Kuwait and surrounding in Jordan flocking to this school. It was nearby. It was a safe place to be. And the teachers were scrambling to try and accommodate these growing class sizes. We didn't have, at the time, an art teacher proper. There was sort of a photography thing going on and some odds and ends. But during that year, I did very little drawing by comparison. But I did actually, because there were things I liked. At the time, I was reading the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles original graphic novel stuff. And so I actually created a poster for my room of Leo. So like an 18 by 24 full color things. So there was a few, I started just making my own art for things I wanted to have in my room, but didn't have access to, stuff like that. And so I did do some drawing that year, I remember, but not as much. But then I got to Taiwan, and 10th grade through 12th grade, I had great art teachers. So shout out to Loretta Wenger and John Wood. They really, and Kathy Wu, sorry, 3 good teachers. And they pushed me to grow, which is, in high school, it's rare to get a teacher who does that for you. And, most of the time you get a pat on the back and they say, you're good at drawing. You should do more of that. Instead, they would be like, well, you're good at doing this. You should try doing more of this, because this is probably somewhere you need to be getting better. And so that happened for like 3 straight years. And then the last year of high school is junior year of high school is the first time I made money doing illustration.
Oh,
and that was such a great motivator, of course, for anybody. And what I did was a couple of album covers for school bands like there was a band Lycanthropy. It was a heavy metal band. These kids did their album cover and their whole thing. Got paid for that. And then I started doing other little odd jobs like t-shirt design for this club or that club, stuff like that. So I made a little money. And then I had been teaching myself calligraphy just as a hobby, because I think a lot of people like to draw, also like to try and do lettering. And so I did all the lettering for the graduation certificates for the senior year class, the class ahead of me for that year, and I got paid well for that. So I had a few quote unquote freelance jobs that year, and I did more of the same in senior year. And so once I had this feeling like, I can make money doing this, and it wasn't like a ton of money, but it was money. I was even more sort of motivated to figure out a way to do that. I just didn't know how. So when I was in college, again, just got really lucky. Had an amazing professor, Mike Ananian, who kind of broke down everything I was doing and just kind of threw it out the window and said, here's how you draw properly, and kind of rebuilt me from scratch. Made me so much better at everything. But he encouraged me to enroll in this program through Yale University called the Yale Norfolk program, where they get about 20 art students from around the world to come for a 6-week intensive. And like anything else, there's no harm in trying.
Right. Yeah.
And I did not feel confident with my portfolio. It was all just naked people, and that's all I had done. But I went ahead and applied, and I got in. So I did that 6 weeks, and that 6 weeks was kind of like almost a whole year of really intense college level instruction in art, and it was amazing. And when I was there, I met people who were working as artists.
Okay.
You know, the faculty. And so just got another peek into the window of like, wow, these people do what they love day in and day out, and that's how they make money. So that made a huge difference. And then when I graduated, I went into web design because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't even still know what illustration was or working as like, what do comic book artists really do, et cetera, et cetera. I'd already had an experience, like at least kind of trying to get something out there though. I had made 2 submissions for the newspaper comics, you know, like the syndicates.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Back when that was a thing. And I did that in my junior year of college. I made 2, you know, and back then the requirements were you had to do a month's worth of dailies and 2 Sundays.
Okay.
For a strip to be considered. So that's a lot of work.
Was it King Features and
I sent it to everybody. Universal, King's Features, whatever. You know, now I'm forgetting all the other ones. But
here's a little weird tidbit. So in 1994, for a brief period, and all too brief, my roommate and I, our apartment was in Hell's Kitchen, but we had this really nice studio space. And for a brief moment in time, we produced the Phantom weekly.
Oh, I love the Phantom.
Yeah. So Lee Falk, who was handling the Phantom at the time, he was probably in his 70s. We thought he was in his 90s, but he was, you know, in his years, but he lived in like this penthouse apartment on the Upper West Side, like because he was a strip guy. And back when strips made a lot of money, he probably bought this apartment. So he had this, you know, and he took a shine to my roommate, and he's like, all right, you can do the strip, kid.
Wow.
And we did the Phantom. All 3 of us would, you know, kind of jam and work on this thing, but like we all kind of got it in our head for some stupid reason that it should look like Mike Mignola's artwork. And
oh my God.
94, you know, Mignola. So this isn't like
more bubbly Mignola.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we, you know, this is like Iron Wolf, you know, Fafford and the Grey Mouser kind of influenced Mignola. So we started producing, like morphing the strip into this look for, you know, a few weeks, and then phone calls started coming in saying, no, you know,
this is not right.
Yeah, no, it was a funny moment.
But still, wow, that's so cool. The Phantom. My dad growing up loved the Phantom from the serials and everything. And I want to say it was Falk, but I don't know how long he lived. One of the old Phantom artists who was in his, I want to say early 90s.
Okay.
Maybe it was him.
Could have been. Was
at the Heroes Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, like a decade ago.
It could very well have been him, yeah.
Yeah, and he did a Phantom head drawing, and I gave it to my dad for Christmas that year.
Cool.
But yeah, and actually, you know what I kind of want to do? I don't want to watch that movie from the
Billy Zane?
The Billy Zane one. I haven't seen it since it came out in theaters. Like, what was that, like 1994, 92?
We're like, yes, this is going to be great.
I know, it was not great, but I still want to watch it again.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, I tried submissions. I got rejected, but the cool thing was just knowing that someone had seen them and sent me the rejection letters. I don't know, there's something about that makes you go, oh, it really can happen, you know? So that was kind of cooking back there. And I was doing illustration in-house at the web design place for the advertising agency that owned the web design shop.
Okay. Right. Because this is early to like, was
yeah,
it like
99 through 2001, around that time.
All the agencies had their web shops before everything crashed, and they were like, no more of you guys.
That's exactly what it was.
Yep.
And like the web shop, we had all the cool furniture from Herman Miller, and they like had, you know, foosball table. They were blowing all this money on a thing. Exactly.
Money. You're going to be the next thing.
That was the thought. Yeah. Anyhow, but because I could draw, like the art directors from the ad side were coming down to me and be like, hey man, can you bust out these 3 boards for whatever? And yeah, okay, whatever. I wasn't getting paid extra or anything. They were just taking advantage of me
for it.
Right. But then when I got laid off from, and as did 90% of us when the bubble burst, they kept coming to me for that stuff. So I was doing that for like 3-4 months, and I was making way more money as a freelancer doing little ad gigs for whatever. And I was like, dang, this is fun. I like it way better than web design. And then I got hired as an in-house designer / illustrator at a design shop. And while I was there, that's when I got to really figure out that I could pretty much use illustration as a design solution to so many problems. And so if it was like a packaging job, I would just be like, solve it with illustration. If it was a logo, solve it with illustration. And just, I grew so fast in those few years drawing and making all these different kinds of drawings and different styles with different quote unquote media, because I was starting then to deal with brushes, would make my own brushes. And that gave me the confidence to go out and start my own illustration business. And so it all just organically kind of happened. But the thread all the way through was loving to draw, drawing all the time, and trying new stuff, like everybody.
The one thing that I think holds a lot of people back is just the fact of putting whatever they do out there. Like if you just need to make things, the more you make stuff, you're going to make mistakes. That's okay. Just keep making things, because you will refine whatever you need to refine to get to the next thing.
Yeah, it's like it's got to be so much more quantity over quality in the early years. You got to just keep churning. And then at the end of every year, look at your portfolio and get rid of all the stuff that you're embarrassed by, and then do the same thing the next year and the next year or the next 6 months, and just keep doing that until eventually you have a book. If you have been working consistently, by the time I did go out on my own, even now, if I look back at that, I'm terribly embarrassed, but it was good enough to get me a whole bunch of illustration work back then. And then every year I just did that. I just kept shuffling away the stuff that was nasty.
Yeah, you could hand that book to somebody else and they could go get work. But the thing is that's, but that was you then at that level. Obviously, you have the ability to open up the preferences panel of Photoshop and go, okay, here I'm going to make a mark. All right, I don't want to do this. I wanted to do something else. And you'll try the A/B. Okay, if we're at 50%, I'll move it to 25%. Nope, that's not the direction I want to be. 75%. Okay, that's closer. Now I got to fine tune it. And it makes me think of like, when you get a new guitar pedal, you're like, not exactly sure what I need. This is, where is the sound that I want from this thing? And you have to kind of consistently do that variation testing to get to that tone that you're seeking. And I think that you would probably make a great guitar tech. I
think, that's a great analogy. The only other thing about it, though, is the hardest thing about it for me was, everybody draws differently.
Sure.
Everyone has a light touch, a heavy touch. For me, the hardest thing was once I got a tool to feel exactly how I wanted for me, then trying to figure out, can I adjust this so that it kind of hits a sweet spot for enough people that they're happy with it and they don't think it's too tight, too loose, too whatever. That I realized quickly was going to be the hardest thing, because everyone can fine tune something for themselves. Then how do you kind of and so I think that's where it was really helpful for me to have feedback from people like Paolo and Tommy Lee Edwards. I mentioned them a lot because I would actually be emailing with them a lot and trying to get feedback on the way stuff felt. Because I just kind of felt like they could represent a large group of people who kind of draw in a similar way or whatever.
Well, that's also the man on the ground approach. So Tommy Lee is saying, hey, the problem is when I do this, I'm not getting the result. It's not blending into the thing, and I'm not being able to pull the colors up so I can get that sort of wash effect that I really want this to have. And then you go, oh, okay, well I can make that change, and that's a thing. That's a bit need.
Yeah. In fact, I went so far, and I've done this a few times, to design custom tools for specific artists. And for Jillian Tamaki, I made some inking tools. She's I don't know if you know her work, but she's absolutely amazing comics, graphic novel, illustration. She's in Canada. She did a book called Skim, and then what's that book? Summer. Oh, for crying out loud! This One Summer.
Okay. With
her cousin Mariko Tamaki. She's done a bunch of covers for books and for magazines, and Just had another graphic novel come out, picture books. But anyway, like a very specific inking tool I made one time for her, just going back and forth. And then John Martz, did some stuff with him. Tommy, I made a few custom things. Christoph Niemann, the German illustrator, made some tools for him. There are some people who I just was like, they would write to me and say something. I was like, the easier thing for me to do is just to make exactly what you want.
Sure. Right.
And just give it to you and let you have it.
Well, I know Matt gave his brush. I mean, gave his brush to Brennan Wagner when he was, teaching Brennan how he colors. So Brennan's like, I use that brush. Like, that's the brush I use because
cool.
That's the tool that he learned, to ink, to color with. So
yeah, most people use just a handful of tools, but they love them and they're their tools. And so for me to make thousands of brushes, the idea is not that people are going to use them all. The idea is someone will find amongst those thousands of brushes 2 or 3 that they absolutely love.
Yeah. Well, we'll try them all.
One of the coolest things actually was when I'd make a brush with in my mind, I'd think this is what this brush is for. And then see that some professional artist out there who I really admire is using it for something completely different. And then I'm like, oh, cool. It's good for that too. I'd never meant for it to be for that, but they use it for that. And that's always really fun when that happens. That happens a lot actually. And then I use it that way. So I find and discover new ways to use my own tools because other people are using them. I'm like, oh, cool. You can do that with it. I'll do that. That's a neat thing that happens, this weird back and forth or cyclical or whatever it is. I don't know what that is, but that's
feedback, cool. Right? A feedback loop. You're getting it.
Yes.
Do you know that there's a designer named Bruce Mao? He's a Canadian designer.
I think that, the name Mao sounds,
Yeah, he's a phenomenal guy, just a brilliant thinker, and he has this Mao's manifesto. I mean, if you Google Mao's manifesto, you'll find it, and it's full of just chock full of great things to think about as a creator. And one of his ones is like customize all your tools.
Oh yeah.
And like I remember reading that, and I was looking, and this is probably 20 years ago. I look around my little workspace, like everything is customized. Like that's what keyboard shortcuts are for. Like, make them work the way that you want to work.
And that's a level I think everyone gets to when they've gotten comfortable with the fundamentals. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the other thing too that's interesting about digital art is how this is, and I see this as a more of a negative thing about digital art is how for the younger artists or for students, it may cause them to skip steps in their development where they go from that point of like liking drawing, wanting to draw better, to suddenly being overwhelmed by all these tools and tricks and digital, super effects and all this other cool stuff that they'll miss a middle step where they're just really hammering on fundamentals of composition and line and value and, proportion, all these things that come from literally just you and a pencil.
Yeah.
And then, struggling with that for a few years until you get that baked in, because when you have that baked in, that digital world becomes so much more powerful for you as an artist because you know how to take from it what you need to amplify what you're good at versus, somebody just dumping in your lap 64 million colors.
Sure.
And 2,000 brushes. And you go, well, this kind of looks cool. And you just spend a lot of time just doing that, but not getting better at drawing and telling a story and composing an interesting image. So that to me is an interesting thing for teachers now to have to navigate is how do you get students to care about that middle part?
To drop shadow or not to drop shadow.
Right.
That's this is the story of the desktop publishing craze of the early 2000s. This was the thing.
It's true.
You put the tool that was in the sort of the arena of the professional into the hand of the masses, and the masses go, cool, we can do this. And that was so they that's what they do is they do it.
Yeah.
But they don't have the fundamentals, they don't have the skill sets, they don't have all these things in place to know whether they should do it or not do it. And
they don't even know what kerning is. And you're giving them 2,000 fonts.
Right. Yeah. And that so and it's and I'm not saying this to be disparaging to people who are utilizing tools and going, I can make this thing. That's great. That's fantastic. But as you said, there's this middle ground of knowledge, and it takes a while to.
Yeah, that's the important stuff.
Right. And it's going with what you said. Like, it's like quantity over quality. Like, just if you're learning a thing, learn a lot of it and just keep going and make all the mistakes and then look at it in retrospect and go, okay, well, this seems like I solved this problem well. I don't understand how to draw hands clearly. Let me figure that out next.
The hands thing, I love that one because James Jean once was writing about, or maybe talking about his development.
Mm-hmm.
When he was at SVA, he filled an entire sketchbook or maybe two with like 30 or 40 hands per page from every conceivable angle. By the end of that process, he said, that was it. I was done. I could tell me a hand, any position, I could draw it. It's like proof positive that it's just the repetition of the thing and the study of it, like with intensity, that yields the results. And I love that because James Jean draws beautiful hands, and he's gone beyond drawing anatomically correct hands to drawing stylized, anatomically mostly correct hands, but like stylizing it for beauty, not for the sake of accuracy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because I think we struggle between fidelity and art. And there's this factor of like, oh, well, it has to be right. It has to be correct. And that's great. And that is true to a degree. And then you kind of move beyond that. And I think that's, and you could easily dismiss this part of our conversation to say, well, it's James Jean and like, I can't draw that well and nobody else can draw that well. But I disagree in the sense that the reason he is that way is because he's filled 2 sketchbooks up, because he makes that effort to say, I'm going to get better and better at the thing that I want to do. And that's just volume, repetition. And the more you do the one thing over and over again, the less you have to think about that thing. And the more you can access all of that gained knowledge.
And it's the repetition with purpose. It's beyond just repeating. Like if I were to play scales all day on the violin and continue to make the same mistake every time I'm practicing, I'm not really getting ahead. But if I'm noting the mistake and then intentionally working to correct it and then moving on to the next mistake and the next mistake, then I'm going to get somewhere. So there has to be that acknowledgement of where the shortfalls are, the shortcomings.
Figure that thing out, and then you speed back up, and then you speed back up to the point where you start to make mistakes again. Then you slow down, and that's just how you learn anything if you approach it in that fashion.
And I was just thinking about, you mentioned Mignola, but like the thing about him paring down to the essence of whatever it is he's drawing over the last 20 years, you can watch that process from him having this much detail and this much work going into every individual drawing to paring a figure down to just like 6 or 7 lines with a few really well-placed spot blacks. There's just no way you could go from point A to point Z in a year. It's because he worked through that. And I love that one of my favorite things about him is that we as artists ourselves and observers of him can see his evolution anytime we want. We can pick up a Hellboy from 1996.
Right.
And then we can pick up, Hellboy in Hell.
Yeah.
And go, oh, look at that. It's so cool to see it happen.
Right. You can go back in the 80s and pick up his Michael Moorcock Corum series, and it's like phenomenal and beautiful and wonderful, but it's not what you were looking at today. But
there are teeny tiny hints that it's coming.
I mean, the
like No Feet. No, just kidding.
But like it's what's really interesting is about Mike is that we look at this and say, oh my gosh, he just covers everything up with black. It's, either A, it's beautiful, or B, man, he doesn't have to draw a lot. But the thing is, he actually draws so much stuff that he then covers over with black.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't made that final choice. He's like, what do I need to show to tell this story the way I want it to be told?
And he's just a great designer. I mean, it's just design choices. This is my prized possession here. This pencil drawing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and like what I love about it is it's hard to see, I'm sure, on camera, but you can see him working through everything. There are all these lines, alignment stuff. Like he's got a line dropping down from the brow down to the chin. It's just a straight line. Where he's just working out proportion, and there's all these little lines that are half erased everywhere. And I love the drawing, but like my favorite thing about it is just that it's just evidence of him thinking through the drawing, and someone at that level who's that great and so wonderful to look at is still doing all the same things we all do. And I like that because it makes me feel closer to him.
Yeah.
Like any other person you look up to and admire, it's like they're doing the same things you're doing. They're just getting there faster or getting there with better results because, more time in.
Yeah, sure. And I've felt with Mike's work for a long time is that he's approaching drawing almost like a sculptor. He is removing elements to create these shapes that we're looking at that catch the most amount of light to tell this, the most whatever he wants.
Yeah, that's perfect. I agree with you. That's very much how. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally cool. So you've done comics. You've delved in the world of it. I guess you mentioned that you showed me some artwork from Light Children.
Yeah.
And so that was how many years ago was that? 9?
That was ages ago, like 2008 or something.
Okay, yeah. So
here it is.
12 plus years ago. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Anyway.
So was that your first like comic book project? Like, was this something like you were like chasing after to do, or?
I met this guy, Andy. He told me the thing is like, I just wish Light Children could exist in the world. I wish that it was a thing that existed and could exist, and that I had the time to make it. Because everyone says this, but it's the coolest story I've ever heard. I just don't have time to draw it, and neither does he. So he's written this 12-book series, start to finish. It's absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. But we're not plugged in. We don't have anybody funding it, and so
right.
I mean, I have a job. I work at Adobe and I do illustration. He has a job running like 2 different businesses. We made a go of it with the first book with no marketing budget, but we somehow made this whole book. Took us forever. And I would just draw it at night after I came home from my full-time job. And I did that for like a year straight. It was crazy. It's about 80 pages full color. I mean, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a ton of work.
I just did and he, the writing and the back and forth and making it happen. But as much as I want it to exist, I know that it's just not possible unless he and I just quit our jobs and work on it for like 4 straight years with no money. So that's just not realistic. We both have families. So I dabbled in comics. Through this experience, I learned a lot about, pacing and all the stuff. And I look at it now, and I of course would do it completely differently today. Every single panel almost, because I know a lot more and I do it better. But you know what? This is the thing: is I'm glad I made a go of it. I'm glad I know what's involved in trying to make a comic. It's so much work. It's so much drawing. It's so much drawing everything. It's not just. You got to draw environments. And
you don't get to draw the cool stuff all the time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. A lot of stuff you don't want to draw. Tommy Lee Edwards was kind enough to let me do a variant cover for Turf when he was working on that with Jonathan Ross. And I did a little holiday greeting card thing for DC once, but I haven't done that much comic stuff, because I'm not really, I guess I'm not looking for it, and I'm also not plugged in. Yeah. I'm plugged into the artists and the writers, and that's cool. And I love being part of the community through the brushes, which is, I think, probably the greatest gift of the brushes is how much it's helped me to connect with so many artists I admire in so many different parts of the industry. So like, because of the brushes, I was able to go to Disney and do a workshop there. And because of the brushes, I was able to go to Pixar and do a workshop, and go to Wacom and do a workshop, and just go to all these cool places and like meet all these people I love and become friends with them. It's been amazing.
12 years, 13 years ago wasn't the time to be self-publishing a book that you could get out there on the internet. Like that wasn't the time.
It was the wrong time. It was a ton of work for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm proud of it just because we made it. We finished it.
Yeah.
There were 11 other books we did not complete because it was just not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Heidi McDonald wrote a positive review of it.
Yeah.
Like, what else do I need? That was it. When that happened, I said, okay, we did our job. We sold out all the copies we brought with us we brought them to Heroes Convention that year, and we brought 350 copies. We sold out 350 copies of this book no one had ever heard of. I thought that was pretty great.
That's a great thing.
So, and that's what happened. And you know, some people ordered it online, and I don't remember what else, but at the end of the day, we both were exhausted. There was no way for us to continue it and still keep our day jobs. And it was over, but it was cool that it happened. And occasionally I still talk to him. And we go, man, maybe one of these days
sure,
we're going to be independently wealthy and we can just do it, you know?
Sure.
And he's got this other story that's even bigger, which is even more amazing, which I really want to draw. And I did a drawing for it. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And
yeah,
this is the thing. You get one life. In a single lifetime, you think you're going to be able to do so much, but I'm already pushing 50 and I'm like, whoops, I guess I realize now that there's only so many things
that you can really
do. Yeah. And that's just the way it is.
Well, and the other thing you said, which I really relate to, is connects you to this community, a community that you have a love for. You love comic book people.
Oh, yeah.
I, stumble like a dummy into many things in my life, like doing this podcast. And now I get to talk to people who inspire the hell out of me every week and go, oh, this is amazing. Like, I'm reconnected to what I consider one of the more interesting and creative communities in the world.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that's really more special than anything else. I mean, it's the people. It's always comes back to that. People who do the thing that you love, and then when you bond over that, it's and there are these really specific communities where it's so tight and you so quickly connect with somebody and just get on the same page. And comics are huge like that. The first time I went to Heroes Con, I was so I just felt I was intimidated to talk to people whose work I knew and who were hanging out. And I got over that so fast because I realized, and this is the same for everyone in this business, you realize how nice and how sweet everybody is, and that everybody has the same self-doubt. And the people who are even at the top of the game, they're still trying to get better at drawing and trying to get better at whatever they're doing. And they also remember what it was like to be wherever you are in that journey. Mm-hmm. And they totally can just time travel back to that and give you the kind of advice you need. The sweetest thing happened at convention last year. My son is just turned 12, draws every day. He's just like me, but he draws tons of comics, his own comics, which I'm so impressed with because I never did that.
Right.
But he was carrying his sketchbook around, and we talked to Chris Schweitzer and Dustin Harbin there. Both of them went out of their way to just stop whatever they were doing, look at his sketches, talk to him about drawing, give him advice, give him a free print, and just encourage him. And then Brian Stelfreeze was sitting by himself, head down, kind of not wanting to be whatever. He didn't even have a name plate or a name tag or no booth information, whatever. He's at a table by himself, just drawing commissions. And I walked up to him and I was like, hey, Mr. Stelfreeze, I don't want to interrupt, but just want to say hello. And I love what you do. And thank you for everything you do for the community, yada, yada, yada. And this is my son. He loves to draw and just wanted him to meet you. And he goes, hey, what you got there? You got a sketchbook in your hands? Mm. He stopped doing a commission, took my son's sketchbook and flipped through it. And I'm not exaggerating. Must have looked at it for a good 10 minutes.
Wow.
Talking about every page, talking about what he liked, talking about what he thought about this, talking about ways to do this better. Mm-hmm. I just was standing there the whole time going, okay, we're going to have to wrap it up. I don't want to bother him. But he never gave any sign or indication that it was all right, get this kid out of my face. He just sat there and talked to him until there was nothing else to say. And it just was one of those things where I thought, yeah, this is the representative of the community that to me best represents what this community is people seeing someone loving what they currently do at their age, but seeing it as like an 11-year-old at the time, and remembering what they felt like. What would it be like if I, as an 11-year-old, met someone like Brian Stelfreeze? What would I want from that interaction? And then giving it to them, as opposed to just being like, look, kid, I got to work.
Yeah, right.
Beautiful moment. And just, I think that's what you want from that kind of thing.
I think he is an inveterate teacher. I think Brian has always been that person. The Gaijin crew all refer to Brian as like their sensei, their teacher.
Oh, that's cool. It doesn't take that much effort to be that kind of person. And then, but at the same time, it's easy to forget to be that kind of person when you are busy or where you have achieved a certain level of success and people are constantly asking you for advice or asking you for things. But to be that way still, when you've come that far is what I hope I do. If people ask me questions about anything having to do with illustration, business wise or otherwise, and I just think that's just so admirable because, that's pretty much what those are the kinds of people I've met in this business. Yeah. Most everybody is like that. And then the few people who aren't, I always think, how did you get this far by not being nice?
Yeah. And as I've gained my own level of wisdom of whatever level that is in life, is this is their time in the world. Maybe this is the time that they're not happy. And I'm catching them on that moment when they're not like something, they just got a bad voicemail or whatever. I can't judge them on that reaction. It's like getting mad at someone on the highway for cutting you off. It's like, they didn't cut you off. That's where they went and you happened to be right there. Like nothing was intentional. So
that's true. That's true.
It wasn't personal.
Right. If it's just one moment too, you don't know the whole story.
Yeah. So I've become, I think, a lot better at, benefit of the doubt. And that actually leads me to, I guess, a couple of things that you're working on right now. This is me really, look at me being the interviewer, huh?
Yeah. Thank you.
So you've got two things out there, the Lines of Zen, and you've got the Trace book. And these are both very sort of self-care oriented items. And why?
So the first one is, admittedly, just way more pure luck, looking for an opportunity kind of thing. Trace. What happened was my former manager at Adobe, now good friend, Koi Vin, had created a Baron Fig notebook. And I really admired the company, Baron Fig, the publisher. They do notebooks and pens and just beautiful stuff. And I literally just said to him, how did that collaboration come about? And I'd like to work with them because I have an idea. And he gave me a contact information. I reached out and it all just fell into place and we came up with this Trace book. And that was the meditative idea came from me starting to get into trying to figure out how to do more meditative practices in my life because I had such bad health issues. And I'm still fighting right now with a couple of things that are slowly getting better, but about a decade of like solid battling with some really annoying, horrible stuff. But meditation being part of that to just calm everything down, get my nervous system and give my body time to like heal as I try and get better. Right. And I tried traditional meditation and just could not really get it to click for me.
Right.
Everyone's different. But then I talked to a lot of other people who were in the same kind of situation with me where they're entrepreneurs of some kind or they're illustrators running their own business, and the stress level's high, and everyone knows this. If you're trying to do a creative business and you're trying to make it, you are always kind of on, and you've got a little engine running all the time, thinking about self-promotion, thinking about that next gig. Is it coming? Is it not coming? Deadlines, blah, blah, blah. And realizing that they too did not have a successful sort of practice in their life for calming themselves down or just taking a moment. Because it's not easy to do it. I tried guided meditations and those were better.
Yeah.
And so what happened was with the Trace book, I was going around to bookstores. This is right, pre-pandemic, and other organizations and doing these meditative drawing workshops to support the idea of the book. And I realized that people liked the book, But the meditative drawing part, the workshop I was doing, was more exciting for them in the long run, because then I'd get emails about them being like, "Yeah, I like the book, but remember that thing you showed me? I'm doing that every morning now." And I was like, "Oh, wait a second. Okay." So what I did then was I took this idea of meditative drawing exercises that take about 5 minutes, and I really put my head down and created about 20 of them. And then I worked with this development partner of mine in Ireland, Dennis Hennessy, who I've worked with on various app ideas for over a decade now. We've never met in person, but I consider him a good friend. It's just how internet relationships are. I sent to him this idea for the app and how I envisioned it working, and we took about 2 years to build it. And now Lines of Zen is there, and it's an app. And the only thing we have to do now is, unfortunately, like everything else in the world, get it out there. And that's extremely difficult. Yeah. The things it has going for it are first of its kind, which I always think is good. There are no other meditative drawing apps. The other thing I have going for it, I think, is that, like me, I can't do traditional meditation and get much out of it, but I can draw and get the benefits of meditation, because I'm sure you've experienced this where you're drawing, you just have to everything gets tuned out because you're focused on this one simple thing. You're making a mark, you're making another mark, you're responding to what's there. And it just kind of sucks your attention. Mm-hmm. And it's a great thing. I just never noticed it before that was my meditation. Right. And I wanted other people to have access to it, but not have to worry about being good at drawing. So each of the exercises is designed to have literally anybody pick up a pencil or a pen and do it. Sure. 5 minutes if they want, they're done. If they want to extend an exercise to 10 or 15 minutes, no problem. They're all extensible, whatever the word is. But yeah, right now we're just, so thanks for asking about it. Now I've gotten a little more, I could talk about it more, but.
Well, you also solve, which is the age old thing when anybody has the spotlight of pressure of drawing something put on them. The answer is, I can't even draw a straight line.
Yep.
Well, guess what? You don't have to draw a straight line.
Nope.
Everyone has performance anxiety because we're judging ourselves on the things, like you said, horses. Yeah. There's a thing about drawing horses, dogs, and children are like the third rails of drawing because people, like adults, you can draw an unattractive adult and people will accept that. They won't get upset. But if you draw an ugly dog, they're going to be pissed.
People or a child.
Or a child, right. So we have this sort of ideal of perfection and cuteness, which dogs and children are definitely in that category.
Yeah.
That is the sort of the pinnacle of it, but it goes down to anything with people and they go, I can't draw that. But you're not asking people to draw something. You're just asking them to be lost in a moment and make a shape, and it doesn't matter. It's okay.
Yeah, and what I love about it is for most of the exercises, they will turn out a little differently every time. So it's not, there are a few exceptions there, but for the most part, these exercises are designed to have a different result every time. Mm-hmm. The other thing I like about it is, and this is, again, I think when I made the brushes, I made them for me first. Mm-hmm. So I was making this app for me first, what would I want? And because of the guided part, that's what I wanted it to be. I could easily just put out some diagrams for how to do a meditative drawing, but I talk you through it, and there's quiet music and there's pretty stuff, and it's very quiet and calm. And
Headspace, that was the guided meditation app that I used for about a year or two.
Headspace is great. I love the idea of someone talking you through the process of meditating, except I wanted there to be an activity where at the end of that meditation, you could look at something and be like, oh, I like that. It's pretty.
Yeah.
But it required no drawing ability. In fact, some of them, when I do the workshops, I say people color in the result and make it a greeting card, or put it in a little 6x8 frame on your desk and remind yourself that you made that, and it's a great feeling.
Moment in the video that you produced, draw a frame around it. Now you made a piece of artwork, and I'm like, how did you come up with because me, the designer brain is going, okay, well, how did he come up with the problem and solve the problem? What was your model in that?
These are literally, I sit with my iPad with Fresco, and I just sit there and I will draw what I think might be an interesting exercise. What's something I could do that has some system, some framework,
right,
where it makes sense what the steps are, what the sort of structure is, and what the end result might look like. So here are the steps. And I mean, this comes from literally just hours and hours of me sitting and thinking, could this be an exercise? Nope. Could this one? And I record my screen when I love this about iPad. You can just swipe down and record the screen with voiceover. So I have hours and hours of recordings that I eventually have to dump so I don't fill up my iPad.
Yeah.
But I'll edit them down to the ones that have some promise. And then the great thing about that is sometimes I get lucky, and the recording I've made, and I've gotten over the period of the 2 years of trying to design this app, I've gotten much more efficient so that now I'm smart enough to where if I think I might have an idea, I record it at the size it should be recorded for the actual app, so I don't have to do it twice or redo. Nice. And I'll get lucky where I'll have at least the video recording ready to go, and then I have to redo the audio with the better equipment.
That's cool. What would you say are the major differences between, and the link to this will be in the doobly-doo so people can, take a look at it. But for your example piece where you have your 5-dot pairs, what was your initial idea? Because we learn through our mistakes. So I want to know like where you went off target.
That's a good question. A lot of the exercises come from me thinking first about what are things everybody can do. People can make dots on a page, and people can connect the dots. This is something you've been doing since you're a kid.
Sure.
So many of the exercises are drawing dots in a certain configuration or non-configuration, whatever, and connecting them in some way. There's a logical way in which you connect them, this to this, this to that, and there are rules in place, but these rules are very easy to follow. It's not complex. So I think that comes from me thinking, what can people draw if they have no skill? If I told them to draw a rectangle, could they do it? Sure. And if I told them to draw lines inside that rectangle from corner to corner, could they do that? And like that's where the idea from for the I'm forgetting the name of my own exercises now. Divide. What's it called? Well, and it doesn't matter. There's one that's based on that idea plus origami, which is a hobby of mine, and the bird base, which has if you open up a bird base and see the configuration of the creases, the folds, when you have the flat square back on open back up after you fold the base. So I was thinking about like ways to do that. So subdividing space, just all the many ways a person could make marks in a semi-organized way on a piece of paper without having to be good at quote unquote drawing.
Yeah.
And so when you start to combine all those, like making some kind of a looping shape, drawing a square, drawing a rectangle, drawing lines, connecting dots, there are many, many, many ways to connect all those into some kind of short exercise. And then what I'm trying to do now is try with every new exercise I design for the end result to be kind of pretty so that you might want to, color it in and put a little frame around it or whatever. It can be a nice abstract design. And this is not a requirement, but it's something that I noticed with some of the exercises where at the end it did look pretty. And that's nice.
You said, you say that in the video, and as I think you say it even before you're kind of finished with it. And I was like, why is he saying that? But by the time you got done with it and the lines, I'm like, yeah, that is nice. It is pleasant and pleasing to see these lines looping over each other and coming around. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's right.
Yeah, that's the goal. Not necessary, but it's a bonus when that happens.
Yeah, for sure. Another thought is, were you or are you an inveterate scribbler?
Of course. My notebooks from high school are endless doodles and patterns and Wolverines and Batmans.
Okay. All right.
The doodling for me was a lot of patterns.
Yeah. No,
and I think a lot of that comes from, so I have my brain, I think this is why I was able to make the brushes, was that combination of pure, free, open, loosey-goosey, creative mark making and wanting to do that, but also the part of my brain that gets excited and interested in totally understanding the brush settings panel and all the little settings and like tweaking this here and that. And it's very mechanical and very sort of squared off. And that combo
comes together
in interesting ways. And
yeah. No, I think that's cool. Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I think, you mentioned the health things, and this is the thing that happens to us. We are invulnerable until we're not invulnerable. And unfortunately, a lot of our invulnerability is taken away by our lack of attention to it. So we can, we could probably take care of, keep ourselves far more invulnerable for a lot longer if we did better job at maintenance. So I get it. And I too have had significant, brushes with the Grim Reaper, and they're not pleasant, and it's not something you want to have happen. So things like self-care, and mental maintenance, these are so powerful.
My health has improved dramatically. If you only were to look at how I do activities for managing stress, reducing stress, calming myself down, that has probably had as much an impact, if not more, than surgeries I've had and other kinds of things, and PT and all this other stuff I've done. And if I had only known to make it a part of my daily regimen, 20 years ago,
sure,
probably a lot of what I'm dealing with now and will be trying to help cure heal for the next 10 years wouldn't even be a problem, wouldn't be an issue. I did it to myself without realizing. There's so much stress. But another smaller component, or actually not so small, one of the health problems I had goes back to middle school when I was getting bullied. I got physically bullied so badly in one incident that it left me with a permanent health problem. And that is why I do hate those 2 years more than the average, So that's also very frustrating. But the stress part, obviously, we all need to work on, and we just live in a very stressful time right now.
For sure. I agree. I don't know if we live. I mean, I think everybody lives in the most stressful time of history. Nobody lives in the future or the past. We live in now, and it's tough. And I've found myself that one thing that I'm really trying to bring into my conversational relationships with people is asking, like, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Like, are you healthy? Because these are the questions I'm asking my friends when I'm on the phone with them, because it's too easy to just go, hey, cool, all good, bye, later.
Yeah.
And we need to kind of take those moments and just be open and fair to each other to say, hey, I'm not feeling as good as I'm tired. I don't know why I'm tired. Because we need that. We need that connection and the ability, because sometimes maybe it's harder to say to the people you see every day versus the people who you don't see every day.
For sure. Because the people you do see every day, it's more convenient for everything to be great because you're relying on them for that kind of interaction.
Yeah.
But the other interesting thing, you mentioned that everybody lives in the most stressful time, whatever time that is. I think the difference today is we're aware of so many bad things going on outside of our immediate sphere of, whatever.
Sure.
And so if I were to travel back 40 years, so 40 years ago, if I were to be quote unquote stressed out or concerned, whatever the stressors would be whatever is immediately impacting my life right here and now in my own environment. I don't think I would be as aware of the many horrible things going on 100 miles away, 1,000 miles away,
right,
5,000 miles away, and then being reminded of it daily. That's the difference. You could hear about horrible things in the news.
Yeah.
But it'd be once a day at 6 p.m. if you cared to tune in or if you wanted to read the newspaper. Otherwise, you could pretty much shut it out. Today, it's difficult with social media and everything else and 24-hour news cycle to not be bombarded with, it's stressful news.
It's omnipresent. I can remember how invasive and disquieting when the crawls first appeared on television.
CNN and
And you'd be watching a show and all of a sudden this thing would crawl up to the bottom and start talking about whatever was coming up next or any news elements.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember this sense of invasion. And now I think about it, it's just part of the world that we live in.
You may not be consciously thinking about it, but subconsciously, we haven't evolved fast enough for that to change. So subconsciously, there's still a little alert going off in your reptilian part of your brain going, hey, pay attention to that. Hey, be worried about that.
Sure.
That's pretty scary.
It's red. It's always red. and
Yeah.
yellow, because
Yeah.
those are the poisons. That's the thing you avoid in the wild.
Right.
So like our minds, like, and I've said this forever, is that we aren't evolving as quickly as our technology is. So
Not even close.
so when we say like, oh, everyone's crazy and everyone acts, nuts or whatever, it's not our fault. It's the tools that we have around us that are just, we're not capable of handling this stuff. Like if you brought cell phones and dropped them into the hands of the people in the 1600s, they would act just like we do, because they're humans. They're the same people then as we are now.
Yeah.
It's just that the world wasn't pressed in on their brain at all times. So,
Yeah.
and so being able to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever your practices are, to be mindful or meditate or whatever the thing is that you can do, it really makes a massive difference in the long run.
Yeah, and that's another. I'm not sorry to bring it back to my app. This sounds very self-serving. No. That's another reason I wanted it to be something people do on paper. It's not designed to be something you do on the screen. The screen is giving you instructions, but I want people to have a pen in their hand and a piece of paper. And there's something about that to me that is so healthy to just not be doing this.
It's who we are. I mean, we are anatomical beings that connect physically to the world around us, and that act of writing, drawing, or whatever it is, we are tactile, and we need this kind of stuff. It's not to say that the digital thing is bad. It's just a different thing, but it is not a human thing. It is a tool. I've even, and I've said it recently, and if you add up all the things I've drawn, in the last 20 years, 95+% of it is been in a digital environment, because the tool is usable, accessible, portable, whatever the thing it needs to be, editable.
Yeah,
it's a big one. But gun to head, and money isn't on the table, and someone says you're going to draw a comic book in the next year. I've thought about it a lot recently, and I'm not going to do it, just in case my wife is listening, I'm not going to be dropping everything to making a comic book. I would do it by hand. I would do it on paper. Now I might use digital tools in the terms of maybe laying it out, but I probably would end up printing that out as blue line, drawing on it a bit, and then inking that with a brush and by hand.
That would be so fun.
I would color it in Photoshop, but if I have to get paid to do something, I'm doing it in a digital environment because I can get the job done. I can make the edits that I need to when the client, and they will, say, hey, can you?
You need it. It's a reversible thing. It's an editable thing. Working digitally is magic. But one of the reasons I'm sad I'm not teaching is because that was my access to charcoal and watercolor and all. That's what I was teaching at the university here. Was I teaching life drawing and portraiture, just charcoal on newsprint.
Oh man.
And a watercolor class.
Yeah. The best part is that, like, you at the end of the session, everyone just kind of lays their pieces down on the floor, and you can walk around and look and see what
that's the best
working on, and you go, wow, that's amazing, and then I mean,
I went to the Society of Illustrators one like about a month ago with a friend from Adobe. We went, and the coolest thing was that I sat down, and before the model came out, I immediately met this couple from France who were in their like 70s, who had been drawing at the Society of Illustrators, for a few years and whatever. And then I met this dude across the way who was working on an iPad, and we were talking about working digitally. And then I met this other guy. It was like just immediately start talking to people and then look at their drawings. And it was all this and everyone's having drinks. It was so whatever. But I was, I'm still very, very COVID shy. So I was wearing a mask and everything, but nobody cared. Everyone's like, some people are masked, some people were not masked.
Sure.
And it was just great to be in person and be with people doing that. And that digital experience to me is lame. It just doesn't cut it.
It's not the same. I enjoy this conversation. I enjoy all the conversations I have online. But if you and I were sitting in the same room together,
100 times better.
It's a human experience. So,
yeah.
And I get it. So, okay. let's not dilly-dally too far here. So, Kyle T. Webster, we can find you everywhere at Kyle T. Webster, right?
Yep, everywhere. Kyle T. Webster, with the one exception being Instagram, because I stupidly deleted my Instagram account a year after opening it in 2010. And they will not give me my original username back. It's some stupid policy they have. So it's kyle.t.webster at Instagram. But everywhere else is Kyle T. Webster.
They'll all be in the doobly-doo. You cool? This is good? You happy?
That's great. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
It was super good to talk to you. Not to lump you in with the Glass Onion crew, but it's always good to get to talk to disruptors.
I'm a disruptor. Well, hopefully in the best possible way.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Like people weren't doing what they were doing at the level they're doing it until you came along. So
that's really nice. Thank you.